Hi, my name is Stacy Lela, and my story is entitled Lego Beast. In my family, truths does shapeshift. So when I was 12, I started to twist my story. It was simple. My mother don't like nobody in she house, and that was that. It was better than saying that Grandpa Man had to go clinic and he would be cranky or whatever lies my mother came up with to keep out visitors. It used to bother me that she of all people would lie like that, although it did seem like a valid reason. Who could ever explain that we had a senile, half man, half animal in the back shed and go on to tell them that my father just so, except that he wits about him, and then maybe add that my big brother was the first one to ever break the blight. Kinda hard to translate, so we all got accustomed to never telling the whole truth. My mother was usually sensitive about what the neighbors think. So when Imran cussed my brother Kenneth and tell him, your father is a lagahu and your mother with the priest, me I know what brother her was, the one that was truth or the one that was a lie. That night, we had a family meeting. My mother was still clasping her Bible. She twirled her sharply around her index. She was the only person I know who would walk in the road reciting the rosary. It have too many things out there, she would say. She was worrying about what out there when the worst was right under her roof. That night was full moon. I didn't see it with my eyes. I remember because it used to draw my pores from beneath my sweaty skin. I was flustered and uneasy. Usually, a cool breeze would come from the forest behind the back wall, but not that night. That night was like the forest was on fire. You even listening? My mother asked, annoyed by me pulling my t-shirt to cool off. Who care about Imran? He's a foul thief. Even my mother would succumb to random acts of the monthly lunar event. She flared from her chair and stared at me with deranged eyes. Listen, child, you better understand what it takes to keep this family out of shame because you don't have it, she said in a threatening voice and whipped me with her index finger. I saw myself leaping through the air, over the doily on the glass table that was sitting there like a Eucharist wafer on a tongue, spinning mid-dive like my own stunt double and grabbing her throat and choking her. I could do it. I felt it. It would be exactly how I imagined it, but a set of noise came from the back outside. It was Grandpa Man. My brothers and my father rushed outside calling him. If you hear noise, he was changing. I wanted to see. I never actually saw him or my father change and was forever seeking proof. Here it was, but I freeze up. I felt uncomfortable with the noise. I thought that maybe the neighbors would hear. Once, they called police for us when we had just moved in. Thank God my father, who did his call Rabbit on the police force. He told them that that was our dog and that was that. This is what happens in gated communities with a set of outsiders living amongst us, or we amongst them. Big fancy area in the middle of the village, protected by tall walls, but it only kept out stories of the Lagahu, but not the Lagahu himself. When we move in, Grandpa Man wasn't rabid yet. It does bother me that we have him locked up in the backyard. It was a small shack made out of rusty galvanized, and despite the smell, Rabbit said have a toilet inside. Neither my mother or Rabbit could confirm it, but most likely it had no shower. Every time I talk about it, my parents say that they open to suggestions. My heart sink. Look at where they have Grandpa Man, and I was worrying more about if the neighbors hear than if he was okay. Fueled by my mother's paranoia. She didn't even look over the fence or watch to see if the phone was ringing. My body went numb. I was the closest to Grandpa Man, but they didn't know that we used to talk. Always about my problems too. He would call me Esme, peeping through the hole in the door. He would have a grin on his face, like he sure was he long dead wife he talking to. No one had known that I used to go in the back, because by the time my father come to check on him, I used to dust it from there. Grandpa Man was the oldest and most renowned lagahoo in the country, Edgar Ramirez. He was 92, an able-bodied old man, and I bet a strong wolf. Grandpa Man would have been quite able, except he had Alzheimer's disease and had to be locked away. He could no longer control the beast and would change sporadically. As his memories came and went, he shifted from a wild wolf to a sad potong. For the safety of others and himself, he was to be put down or locked away. That is how Rabbit managed to build the back shed. Rabbit is my father's nickname. I call him that behind his back too, because I don't know how to call him Daddy. Rabbit bent down and looked through the hole that was used to pass food. Daddy, Daddy, he called. Grandpa Man burst through the door and slashed Rabbit across his face. Then in one leap, jumped on top the 12-foot back wall with a howl that would wake every dog in Degwa. Then he jumped on the other side to run wild in the labyrinth of the forest. As my mother opened the door, I was overwhelmed by the scent of the blood and fainted. "Where, Grandpa Man?" I asked as I opened my eyes. "They would find him, Aliyah," my mother said. I run outside to hear the legend Papa Boa tell Rabbit that he have to put on Grandpa Man or risk exposure to folks. Rabbit's shoulders dropped and he turned and leaped out of himself, shifting his body into a dog. I run off behind him, with my mother calling me in the distance behind me. After searching all night in the dark streets and forests, that morning, before the sun come up, I found them by the deserted crossroads in Degwa. I slumped across the drain, watching, too frightened to step out. Blood was dripping from Grandpa Man's jaws, and his pupils glowed yellow. Both wolves were about same size. The old man moved with more wisdom, and the other with more agility. They paced the street for some time. Within his own world, Rabbit recognized Grandpa Man, but Grandpa Man saw someone else. The old wolf had a big rusty chain knotted by his neck and rattling across the pitch. The rabbit looked away, but that was the mistake. The old wolf was halfway through the air and snapped at his head. Grandpa Man gripped him, and Rabbit fired empty bites at his legs. Only realized that he would have to shake free. As he shook his head vigorously, the old wolf's teeth passed over his left eye, severing Rabbit's eyelid. Blood gushed from the wound, and Rabbit wiped it with his paw in reflex. I thought he was going to die, and I jumped, but I didn't go close. Grandpa Man saw and leaped over the drain and pinned me onto the grass. His breath smelled like coffee and dog. He was foaming at the mouth, and it dripped on my face. I was motionless. Not because of fright, because I thought at any moment that Grandpa Man was in there somewhere and would come back through the contusions of his mind, looking for his dear old Esme. Rabbit saw me and panicked. He realized Grandpa Man was lost. He pounced on the old wolf and dragged him off me onto the asphalt. All the animal he was, Rabbit couldn't end his father's life. I swear I hear Rabbit's voice called out, "Daddy!" But it couldn't be real. The old wolf jumped through the air towards his son's head, and Rabbit gripped the throat of the old beast. His neck snapped in his mouth, and the body of the wolf fell limp onto the road. My blood ran thin. At that moment of death, the animal began to change back into Grandpa Man. Same time the sunlight came up over Sangre Degwa. As Grandpa Man changed back, I ran towards him. Rabbit growled. But then he stepped back and let me be with him because he couldn't do anything in his current form. I sit down flat on the pitch and raise Grandpa Man's head on my lap. I wish I knew how to cry. Rabbit howled. A rabbit howled so dreadful that the entire village knew that someone was dead. Then he took one step and just so disappeared. Thank you.